Hi everyone, Gundam F90 here for a 15th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today we're going to the mid-late UC in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we're going to explore all the mobile suits which served as the Gundam F90 most terrifying enemies. As promised, I will surely do a video covering the story of the 3 Gundams F90s, but first, I wanted to test the waters by showing off the antagonist side and all the mobile weapons which effectively proved to be banes in the F90 feats. But first, a simple question. Why would the F90 have this much enemies? The history of the Gundam F90 is a long and extensive tale, and, lucky you will get someday the complete history. Now, without changing topic, it's important to know that the F90 creation was the mirror that you didn't need a war to be in danger. In UC 111, Shinri had completed the first ever miniaturized mobile suit, a revolutionary Gundam with innovative features, which would change the Universal Century as a whole. Problem: the last Gundams in order, the Penelope and the Xi Gundam, had been manufactured by the mega corporation Anam Electronics, mega corporation which had now a 30 years long monopoly on Federation Gundam development projects, and which wasn't that happy to see this dangerous rival rolling out a potential bestseller, which would obviously mean less money for Anheim. Ice on the cake, the F90 was labeled as the first ever successful miniaturized mobile suit, and this was kind of insulting toward Anheim Evigan, which was the real first miniaturized mobile suit, and this angered the Luna Corporation quite a lot. So here you had the F90 already being target locked by Anheim before it was even completed. Worse, Anheim was perhaps jealous of the F90, but there were also plenty other corporations, notably Rondager Industries, which were curious to see if the supposedly Wonder Boy F90 was that much of a powerful machine, and were ready to go to any length to prove they could do better. And if that wasn't enough, the last large Neo-Zeon group around, Mars Zeon, was planning to return to the Earthsphere someday, so the F90 was already doomed from the start to clash against the secular enemy of the Federation. This meant a lot of enemies for the poor F90, or just a chance to prove itself as a better machine. Now that's enough setting for today, let's bring our mobile suits. Let's start with a machine many of you already heard about, the F90 first contender, a prototype mobile suit known as the MSA 120 ATMoS, short for Advanced Tactical Mobile Suit. A miniaturized mobile suit created by Anam Electronics in late UC 110, the ATMoS was a high-performance machine, specially designed to put the Gundam F90 to shame in front of everyone. Back in UC 109, Shinri had publicly humiliated Anheim Evigan, and the assembly had approved the start of new projects to develop more performing miniaturized mobile suits, a domain in which Shinri was a pioneer. With the looming threat of a Shinri mobile suit seducing the Federation top brass and being adopted, Anheim had started that new development project, using the Evigan, their only reference in miniaturized designs, as a starting ground. In charge of the development was Anheim Granada facility, infamously known for its Zeon's design, notably the Sazabi and the Sinanju, but which had also been strangely put in charge of the Evigan design. The Granada facility initially didn't take the threat of the Shinri seriously, nor did it realize the Evigan shortcomings. What they did was merely to add to the Evigan a waist long altitude vernier and their new invention, the vaporizing applique armor, and call it a day under the name Prototype MSA-120. The vaporizing applique armor was a new technology developed in continuation of anti-beam coating technology. Anti-beam coating aimed to counter beam attacks by diffusing the heat of the beam in the metal frame, but this rarely worked and had many flaws. The vaporizing applique armor was instead the combination of armor plates which would progressively vaporize under beam attacks, protecting the wearer as long as the armor plates were not fully disintegrated. With the F90 completion being imminent, Anaheim started taking things more seriously, and took things to a whole new step by overhauling the prototype MSA-120 into its final form, the ATMoS. This overhaul notably included the replacement of the heavy gun legs by new types of legs for better space mobility, and the addition of a new set of arms. In addition, the heavy gun head was replaced by a new head which featured a Zeonic style mono-eye camera. Internally, Anaheim instead integrated to the design a whole new feature called the Mega Boost. The Mega Boost was a special system which consumed energy caps, the beam weapons magazine, to overload the whole mobile suit with Minovsky particles, and grant it a temporary boost without stalling it. The Mega Boost would then raise temporarily the output of the ATMoS generator by almost 200%, and it will also bring the machine thrust to 120% levels. So consider the Mega Boost as a sort of dope for the ATMoS. Now about its weapons. The ATMoS mainly relied on a new gravitational weapon called the High Impact Gun, which was essentially a rail cannon with a Minovsky craft in it and which generated pseudo-gravity to deliver powerful strikes at enemy mobile suits. Now, as someone pointed out, it's very plausible this weapon was used instead of a beam rifle because E-caps would be better used by the Mega Boost than as regular cartridges or beam weapons. Aside the high impact gun, the ATMoS could also use a Hyper Mega launcher, and in Mega Boost mode, it could use it on its own without external power sources. Thanks Dog Generator! Once it was completed, the ATMoS was brought to a series of evaluation tests alongside the now completed rival, the F90. After the conclusion of the test, run with data of both machines, it was concluded that the ATMoS was better than the F90 in terms of ballistic resistance and maximum output, while the F90 had a better operational cost and was definitely more mobile. At that point, the F90 seemed to have found its lifetime nemesis, the suit which would endanger its adoption in the Federation military. And then came the downfall for the ATMoS. To confirm the simulations, both suits were pitted against each other in a mock fight, and much to everyone's surprise, the F90 overwhelmed the ATMoS and secured a victory for the scenery. With such a resounding defeat, Anaheim lost its face, and the jury presiding the contest determined that the ATMoS, while being 15 meters tall, was not even worse considering a miniaturized mobile suit, but barely a light mobile suit. Although Anaheim did everything it could, including political pressure, it didn't change anything, and the ATMoS lost the competition, with the F90 triumphing over its first nemesis. Now, a good note for the ATMoS. Its area of successes, ballistic resistance and max output, were areas the Federation Bureau wouldn't compromise over, and the scenery was forced to develop the successor of the F90, the F91, according to these criteria. The MSA-120 features were later brought back by the scenery and partially inherited by Scenery F91 and also Anaheim Custom G. Yet for Anaheim, things were unsettled. In UC-115, the MSA-120 reappeared in Faster's formula, after having been added to a space tribe and was deployed secretly on Anaheim orders in a sort of mobile suit assassination attempt against the F90 Unit 2. While the ATMoS didn't succeed, it still managed to damage Unit 2 on its shoulder and shoot down a cannon Gundam, a mighty feature on its own. In the end, the ATMoS failed its ultimate mission and was destroyed, later being seen in Crossbone as a space wreckage. Enough anime bastardly machines. Now, time to present you the second F90 Nemesis, a machine you probably never heard of, the Tigris. Introducing the manga fastest formula, the Tigris is a very refreshing design, in the sense it's neither a mobile suit from Anime Electronics, neither a mobile suit from the scenery. The Tigris was instead created as part of the RDG series by a rising corporation named Randager EV Industries, a company specialized in top-notch civilian technologies. The CEO of the company was a man named Hoyer Randager, which became interested in the Gundam F90 and sought way to test the Gundam true potential. See, Hoyer was not really interested into stealing the Gundam or creating a replica. No, he just wanted to destroy the F90 just to prove a point, that his technology could vanquish the legendary Gundams. In UC-112, Hoyer and his secretary Griselda had manned another Randager Industries creation, the Mobile Armor Carcarius, in an attempt to take down the F90 Unit 2 in its M-type configuration. The attempt had failed, and Hoyer plans to have the Gundam head had been postponed. Later, his company resumed the Gundam hunt and produced the Tigris to serve as the executioner. The Tigris is actually a very serious and effective design, despite its very goofy look. First, the Tigris is capable of operating both in space and on Earth with just a single change of configuration needed. And it also displayed amazing mobility thanks to a large number of altitude verniers and thrusters disseminated all over the body. Second, the Tigris is miniaturized, which is impressive since in the early UC-110, such mobile suits were still quite a rarity. And even better, the Tigris has 2 pairs of legs, so 4 legs in total, which greatly improve its hand-back abilities. If that wasn't enough, the Tigris is also a transformable mobile suit, and is able to transform into a mobile armor mode, which granted a very high mobility in space. In the manga, the Tigris has also been shown to be capable of partial transformation by transforming only the lower portion, which make it even more versatile. Now about its weapons. In mobile suit mode, the Tigris mounts 2 composite weapons on its vambrace, which are essentially handled jaws, but which also mount 6 beam Gatling guns on each arms, and this grants the Tigris close and mid-range firepower alike. In mobile armor mode, the Tigris can instead use the large jaw of the mobile armor animalesque mouth and use it to crush an entire mobile suit with a single bite. Production-wise, Randager Industries produce only 2 of such Tigris, an orange unit piloted by Hoyer Randager himself, and a purple one, piloted instead by his secretary Griselda. At the end of the first arc of Fastest Formula, before the time skip, the 2 Tigris successfully lured the F90 Unit 2 in a desolated area of Site 6, with the purple Tigris of Griselda launching the first offensive, only to lose its lower body and left arm after having been struck by the beam shield of the F90 Keep type. The orange Tigris of Hoyer then ambushed the F90, now in its N-type configuration, and notably used a new exploitation system which compiled data collected by Griselda during the first engagement. Despite this, Hoyer's machine was also pushed back, but the Tigris pair managed to achieve the unsinkable, as the prolonged fight against them caused the F90 to be hit by one of its own beam saber funnels, destroying it. The 2 damaged Tigris then retired, leaving the F90 carcass behind. While the F90 Unit 2 would be rebuilt, the Tigris proved in the end to be the most dangerous nemesis the F90 would ever face, and the only one to actually succeed in eliminating the Gundam. You know how they say, you either die as a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. After being gang raped by the Tigris, destroyed, rebuilt, damaged again, then painted in horrendous purple colors, one could think the F90 Unit 2 misfortune would be finally over. Wrong. As it finally reunited with Unit 1 after an almost decade of separation, Unit 2 was immediately targeted by the remnant group Mars Zeon, who assaulted both Gundams during their test flight and successfully hijacked the poor Unit 2, kidnapping it to their secret base on Mars Olympus Mountain. Now, it's important to understand that at that time, Mars Zeon didn't really have a use for the Gundam. Sure, the hijack was a powerful message, which set words of their return, but the Gundam in itself was kind of useless to them. Yet, there was someone in Mars Zeon that was very interested in such Gundam. Meet Major Butch Miller, a old Mars Zeon that plays in the Federation forces. Butch had once been a loyal Federation soldier, but after witnessing the Axis shock and the new Gundam performance, he became envious of the power of the Gundam and sought to claim it for himself. Why Butch chose the F90 and skipped both the Penelope and the Xi Gundam, direct descendants of the new Gundam he so hardly admired, is above me honestly in terms of in-lore explanation, but the fact remained that Butch had now Unit 2 in the palm of his hands. Under his personal directives, Mars Zeon engineers overruled the capture F90, turning it into one of the future mortal enemies of the F90 line, the OMS-90R Mars Zeon F90. Now let's talk about this overhaul. First, the overhaul was not just cosmetic, or made just because Mars Zeon wanted a petty higher performance for the captured Gundam. See, miniaturized mobile suits are cheaper than standard size mobile suits, but they are machines requiring far more manutention, and unfortunately for Mars Zeon, they lacked any spare parts and essential components for the F90, because they had just stolen the unit alone. Sure, they could craft copy parts with their own technology, but the F90 would still need to be modified. So their first priority was to make the F90 compatible with these parts, and also other parts taken from their RF series, and to achieve that, Mars Zeon had to replace more than 80% of the mobile suit external frame. This, of course, came at a cost, as the removal of the armor frames resulted in the loss of hard points, which mean Unit 2 couldn't use mission packs anymore. Now, since no mission packs had been captured by Mars Zeon, this proved to be a futile loss. With no opponents to care about, Mars Zeon made their own set of modifications and had plenty of new upgrades to the captured Gundam. Among them, many were purely cosmetic. Obviously, the V-fin was removed, and the left shoulder received a spike in honor of the Zaku traditional spiked shoulder. Another often unseen cosmetic modification was that Mars Zeon re-exposed the neck power cables of the F90, which had been previously covered and were now reminiscent of Zeon's old designs with their external power cables. In the same way, the Mars Zeon F90 only retained a single beam saber to make it less Gundamish. Now, don't think all the changes were just for show. A good chunk of them actually improved the performance. First, the 4 braces received special connection mounts which could supply large amount of energy, and because of that, it is actually possible that Mars Zeon planned to have it mount a beam shield, a technology they could, later would, have obtained thanks to their Crossbone Vanguard sponsor. In addition, the F90 received improved sensors, and it was upgraded with 11 additional altitude verniers, which gave it better maneuverability. Weaponry-wise, the Mars Zeon F90 abandoned its old beam rifle for a new beam machine gun, which was directly modeled after the one-year war MMP-90 machine gun. Final bonus, This mobile suit mounted a pair of 2 tubes grenade racks on each hips, which were designed to be effective against enemy mobile suits. But let's move to this machine's short career. During most of the F90 manga, the F90 Mars Zeon type was kept hidden in the base of Mount Olympus and only revealed itself at the end of the manga for a final confrontation. As the F90 Unit 1 finally reached the secret base, the Mars Zeon F90 Major Bochin cockpit suddenly appeared in front of its sister unit and brutally engaged a brotherly duel to death. The fight would be brutal, and the Mars Zeon F90 performance, combined with Boch's piloting skills, would prove to be an overwhelming force for the F90 Unit 1, resulting in the Fedi F90 being stripped of its remaining ADS parts before losing its head and left arm. However, as the Mars Zeon F90 was going for the killing blow, Unit 1 suddenly raised its rifle, and in a last shooting mirroring the RX-78 last move, it blasted its twisted sister, destroying it and thus winning the combat. Of all the F90 Nemesis, the Mars Zeon F90 would prove to be at the same time the shortest lived and the one who would have the most success. Yes, the Tigris succeeded in destroying a F90 and killing its pilot, but the Mars Zeon F90, well, alone, it managed to wreck a Gundam F90 to the point it was forced to be sent back to the assembling line, and then later, the Mars Zeon F90 gained its redemption by becoming the F90 second. Need to say something, Mars Zeon F90?
I've won.
Ah, remember that memorable fight? A Gundam against a Gelgoog. Wouldn't it be nice to see a let-you-see version of that duel, right? Well, if the RX-7802 Gundam is mirrored by the F90, surely there has to be a let-you-see version of the Gelgoog, right? Here is the fourth and last nemesis of the F90, the super bulky mobile suit known as the RF Gelgoog Rochester type. But first, a short faction backstory. After the 1-year war, some Zeon remnants had retreated on Mars, but unlike what was thought when F90 first aired, the remnants there were not a monolith society of old geezers. According to Advance of Zeta reboot Gundam Inlay, the let-you-see Marsians were the survivors of almost 4 decades of civil war between the different Zeon factions, and at last, they had started planning a move against the Federation. To achieve that, they had created the RF series, advanced mobile suits camouflaged under 1-year world designs, with the aim being to confuse the Federation forces. Among them was for example the infamous RF Zaku, and a more performing mobile suit, the RF Gelgoog. In UC-120, Mars Zeon had been assaulted by the Federation following them stealing the F90 Unit 2, and were thought to have been completely wiped out. Yet, that was hardly the case. At their head was now a charismatic ace pilot, Charles Rochester, an ace like no one had seen in decades. When the old mobiles conflict of UC-122 had finally started, Rochester had boarded a regular RF Gelgoog, but in a first encounter against the F90, he had realized how outmatched his mobile suit was, and after a second defeat, he had decided to change mobile suit. Preparing for an inevitable future encounter, Rochester ordered Mars Zeon engineers to customize a red RF Gelgoog, which was an enhanced version of the RF Gelgoog, in order to be able to fare better against the Gundam. Now, calling the RF Gelgoog Rochester type a custom mobile suit is a little bit insulting. First, most of the armor was replaced by new red and white bulky frames, offering better ballistic protection and general defenses. While this resulted in increased weight, the propulsion system was also updated, and so the Rochester RF Gelgoog still retained the max acceleration of its most common brethren. Internally, this unit also installed a modified generator with an output bonus of 640 kilowatts, which enable it to power multiple beam assets. About its weapons, first, the Rochester type used an enhanced version of the 1-year-old 120mm machine gun. Kochu. This weapon isn't a machine gun, it's a camouflaged beam rifle. Aside this weapon, the Rochester type can use a beam launcher camouflaged as a 1-year-old dome bazooka. Nasty, isn't it? And for close-range combat, this new Gelgoog replaced the beam Naginata by 2 new beam sabers for dual wielding. Now, about its most effective asset. Knowing the danger posed by the F90 beam shield, Rochester arranged for his sponsor of the Crossbone Vanguard to have the same technology installed in his customized Gelgoog. This meant that the RF Gelgoog of Charles Rochester mounted a beam shield on the shoulder of his choice. And while this may seem not much in late UC, keep in mind that at that time, only the Gundam F90 was thought to have this technology, so imagine the surprise of everyone when such Gelgoog showed up. And here is where things started getting bad, very bad for the RF Gelgoog Charles Rochester type. With this new amazing mobile suit, Charles expected to fight a last duel against the Gundam F90. But imagine his surprise when his rival Bug Squad showed up not in the Gundam F90, but in the prototype F91. Rochester had prepared for the last war he had fought, without even considering his enemy could upgrade, and this would cost him dearly. Supported by his men now in Crossbone Vanguard mobile suits, Rochester still engaged the F91, and despite stalling the fight for as long as possible, he was unable to evade 2 shots from the F91 beam launcher, which blew up the Gelgoog head, then whole set of legs. Rochester would survive, but his Gelgoog, not so much. In the end, the RF Gelgoog Charles Rochester type would prove to be the unluckiest of the F90 Nemesis, the one who never got the chance to face down its intended enemy, and worse, which was shot down in its very first engagement. And we have now completed today's topic, and I hope you all like it. This will be all for today's video, but stay tuned for future lore content delivered on the same channel. Hit the like button, and most importantly, comment and subscribe as it will really help the channel to flourish. So long fellow new types, until the time of our next special edition.